Somewhere in a museum drawer in Johannesburg sits a skull no bigger than a grapefruit, and punched clean through the crown are two small, matching holes. For decades, scientists assumed early humans were the hunters, the killers, the ones who tamed the wild. Then one man pressed a leopard's lower jaw against those two holes, and they fit, not close. Exactly. The killer wasn't holding a spear. It was hunting on four legs in the dark, and the skull belonged to one of us. That single fossil quietly rewrote the story of our ancestors. But it also opens a much stranger question, one that gets darker the longer you sit with it. If our earliest relatives weren't the dominant predator of their world, if they were, in fact, prey, then how did a slow, clawless, weaponless creature survive long enough to become anything at all? What problem forced them to invent something no other species on Earth had ever needed to invent? And what was the first, desperate solution? The one still echoing, quietly, every single time you lock your front door at night. Stay with this, because by the end, you'll understand that the first home humans ever built wasn't built for comfort. It wasn't built for weather. It was built out of fear, and the proof of that fear is written directly onto the bones of the people who lived it. Picture the East African savanna, almost 2 million years ago. Not the sunlit nature documentary version, the 3 in the morning version. No electric light exists anywhere on the planet. The dark is total, and it is not empty. Somewhere out there move animals bigger, faster, and better armed than anything alive today. Sabre-toothed cats like Meganterian, false sabre-tooths like Dinofelis, hyenas twice the size of the ones we know, and standing barely 5 feet tall, right in the middle of all of it, is a creature with no claws, no fangs, poor night vision, and skin instead of fur. On paper, it shouldn't have lasted a single season. The odds weren't just against early humans. The odds were actively hunting them. And this isn't speculation. It's forensic. At the South African caves of Swartkrans and Olduvai, a scientist named C.K. Brain spent years cataloging thousands of ancient bone fragments, and a disturbing pattern kept surfacing. Puncture wounds, drag marks, tooth scoring that matched predation, not scavenging. His research flipped the old narrative on its head completely, and it didn't stop with leopards. Decades later, researchers re-examined the famous Taung child, the very fossil that first suggested Africa as the cradle of humanity, and found something nobody expected: talon punctures, beak damage, wounds matching a modern eagle kill. The child hadn't fallen. It had been carried off, from above, by a bird. 2 separate predators, 2 separate directions, the ground and the sky. And both of them had learned the exact same thing. Early humans were easy prey. So the question stops being, why did humans build shelter? It becomes something sharper. How do you defend a body with no natural weapons against animals built entirely for killing? The answer wasn't a spear. It was something far more primitive and far more important. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, buried in earth nearly 2 million years old, archaeologists uncovered something that stunned the world: a rough circle of piled stones, possibly the base of a windbreak, branches or thorn bushes once wedged between the rocks to form a barrier. Possibly the oldest deliberately built structure ever found. Older than fire, older than language, older than almost anything we confidently call human. For a moment, it looked like the mystery was solved. This was the first home, built to keep a family alive through the night. But here's the twist most documentaries leave out completely. Not everyone agrees the circle was built at all. Some archaeologists argue those stones could just as easily be natural. Sediment shifting, rocks settling, pure coincidence stacked over 1 million years. There is no consensus. It remains one of archaeology's great unanswered questions. A structure that might be humanity's very first home, or might be nothing more than an ancient accident of rock and time. And that uncertainty is worth sitting with, because it tells you something honest about this whole story. It survives only in fragments. And sometimes the truth really is an open question, not a tidy answer. What isn't disputed, though, is what came next. And it may matter more than any wall of stone ever could. At Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, scientists uncovered burned bone and ash dating back roughly 1 million years, the earliest secure evidence of fire ever used inside a cave. Further north in Israel, archaeologists found something even more remarkable: repeated, controlled fire use, maintained not for one lucky night, but across countless generations. This wasn't an accident, it was a habit. And fire didn't just provide warmth. It became a wall no nocturnal predator would cross. For a creature with no claws, flame was the first weapon that worked while you slept. And that's where this story stops being about stones and starts being about something far more human. Building a shelter was never really about keeping out rain. It was about the impossible vulnerability of unconsciousness. The fact that sleep, the one thing every predator on the savanna could exploit, is also the one thing no human being can survive without. Picture it. The first small groups, arranged around a fire each night, someone always half awake, listening, flames throwing shifting light against stacked stone or cave wall. This wasn't comfort. This was defense, rehearsed nightly, for hundreds of thousands of years, by people who understood, in the most immediate physical sense, exactly what was waiting in the dark. And the bigger picture here goes even further than survival. Some researchers argue that mastering fire didn't just protect early humans, it transformed them. Safer nights meant deeper sleep. Deeper sleep freed up energy once spent purely on defense and digestion. And that energy, some scientists believe, may have helped shape the trajectory of the human brain itself. Whether every detail of that theory holds up or not, one thing is undeniable. The decision to build a barrier between yourself and the night wasn't incidental to becoming human. It may have been one of the very conditions of it. Shelter, fire, and the vigilance they allowed. They didn't just keep bodies alive until morning. They created the first safe space fragile enough and important enough for children to sleep deeply, for groups to bond, for a species that should have gone extinct in the dark to instead multiply across an entire planet. Which brings us back to that skull in a drawer in Johannesburg. Two small, precise holes, punched through bone almost 2 million years ago. It's easy to look at a leopard's tooth marks and feel a kind of historical distance, as if that fear belongs to a version of humanity long since outgrown. But the instinct that built the very first wall never actually left us. It just changed shape into locked doors, into porch lights left on overnight, into that quiet unease so many people still feel, walking home after dark, for no reason they can name. The first home wasn't built to keep out the weather. It was built to keep out something with teeth. And somewhere in the oldest part of the human mind, some part of us is still building it. If this story changed how you look at your own front door, you already know what to do next.